Beast Player Erin review. Stig, there are so many more things I could have said about this show that wouldn't even constitute much of a spoiler. One I might have granted a bit ahead of time is the death of Erin's mother, but that was one of the things we kind of saw coming long before it happens. I've mentioned the poor survival chances of parents of shonen heroes before, and Erin is, sadly, no exception. Tim, usually with an anime synopsis on this site, we only cover the first or so episode. But Beast Player Erin has so much going on, it's hard to do that. So much goes on in these 50 episodes, simply writing about the first few episodes' plot wouldn't do this series justice. In a sense, Beast Player Erin is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Its visual style carries the feel of a children's show, with relatively simple character designs and an odd background style, where the backgrounds look like they were drawn and colored with crayon. Just by looking at the show's still art, you could probably be forgiven for thinking it would be completely innocuous, akin to other children favorites like Dora the Explorer. It's an understandable assumption, but it's also wrong. However you peg this show and its inhabitants, there's just no getting ready for the layers and layers of stark, mature portrayals Beast Player Erin unloads upon you. Don't pat yourself on your back for figuring out that Erin's mother will face an imminent death. It's how that counts, and there's just no getting ready for that. There's an astounding amount of politics at work in the world of Erin, and while most of that will make its appearance in the later time skips, and yes, there are time skips, they are both horrific and beautiful in their execution. For instance, we will eventually be taking part in John's past, and it's not an easy ride. But its starkness is neither played out for sensationalism nor laughs, and neither of us could see its consequences coming. And you have to understand how weird that is, this odd disconnect where it's revealed that the guy who, up to that point, tended his bees and unloaded all of the show's fart jokes, used to be a very important person to many, many lives. This weird disconnect also includes the characters of Nuke and Mach, who end up becoming the show's go-to cast for comic relief. Their antics, as well as John's farts, is the sort of thing that would fit in well on a children's show, but feels kind of out of place among the shady dealings and skullduggery going on in the world of Erin. We could at least understand the farts, but these two and their roles in Beast Player Erin quite frankly confounds us both. Thankfully, their roles don't detract, or distract, too much from the show itself. Case in point, where the series gets very serious near the end, and it gets very serious, they're almost entirely absent. So yeah, kudos to learning when and when not to have comic relief in your series, production IG. And I sincerely mean that. Tim, the rest of the cast are generally portrayed quite realistically and convincingly, including Erin's fellow students, the teachers, and the ruling body of Erin's world, for whom she will have lots of dealings with as the show creeps towards its end. Feminists in particular will probably be quite satisfied with the show. Erin is a female lead one can easily be proud of. While she has her bouts of childish rebellion in her youth, to the point where Stig and I joked about her tendency to do what she was specifically asked not to in the synchro sessions, Tim, she becomes quite the important part of the university she eventually attends. She also becomes the caretaker of Lilin the Aju, a winged beast that kind of resembles a bird with a wolf's head and a rat's tail. This is a position she wrestles out of the hands of its former caretaker, a young man named Tamura. And while he didn't take too well to it at first, it was never done out of any kind of malice, but an honest love for these beings, so eventually, he sheds those feelings of jealousy and mistrust and becomes her closest aide. There are some nitpicks we could throw out. Like how the show's naming conventions can make it a bit confusing in the long run, with names seemingly made up for this world alone, along with its legends and mythologies. There's also the aforementioned comedic aspects that feel a bit out of place in this show. There's also a few things the show never really explains, like why the beasts are given something called alimentary water, a concoction that actually serves to weaken them, which seems more like a critique of the prospect of domesticating animals in a certain way. It's an illusion, at least, and we don't want to write it in stone because we're not entirely sure if that's what the show is trying to say, or if it's just how we interpreted it. Which is actually a plus in the show's favor, It has the decency to be vague or divisive about something. Far too many shows are too hung up on having its lead be right about everything, but Erin might allow you to love and admire its female lead without necessarily having to agree with everything she says and does. And lastly, Beast Player Erin flat out states that Erin's mother is one of the people of the mist, but we're never really told who they are or what they do. Erin is occasionally visited by one of them, a man named Nassan, who advises her against working with the Aju in fear of what her teachings will bring. While his warnings are understandable to a certain point, he, and by extent the people of the mist, kind of come across as a bunch of sanctimonious stagnatists, and his lines about how he's looking after her is a joke, given that he does nothing other than berating her throughout the 8-year time period this series takes place in.